everyone, and welcome back to Becoming Counsel. Today, we're going to walk through an evidence essay question that you could potentially see on a law school exam. So let's get started with the fact pattern. Let's say a man owns an electric bike that he uses for his daily commute. He takes the bike to a repair shop for a routine tune-up. After inspecting the brakes, the technician sends him a text message that says, and I quote, "Your brake pads are more worn down than I would like. You should schedule a replacement soon." End quote. The man reads the text message. The next day, as he's picking up the bike, he asks the technician if it's fine for him to keep riding. Instead of answering verbally, the technician just simply replies to him with a thumbs up. A week later, while riding through the intersection, the man collides with a runner. The runner sues him for negligence, arguing that the man knowingly rode with an unsafe bike that needed new brakes. At trial, everyone testifies. The runner wants to introduce the technician's message. The man wants to introduce both his question and the technician's thumbs up. So let's get started with analyzing each piece of evidence and whether or not they're admissible. So issue 1 is whether the technician's text message is admissible. So under the federal rules of evidence, hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. If the statement is offered for another purpose, such as showing notice or its effect on a listener, it's not hearsay. And that's essentially the rule. So let's just apply it here. Here, the text message can be offered for two completely different purposes. Number one, the runner could offer it as proof that the brake pads are actually worn out. And if that's the purpose, that's hearsay and it would not be admissible. But if the runner instead offered the message to simply prove that the man had warning about some issues with his bike, then that's a significant difference. It doesn't matter whether the brakes are actually defective. What matters is that the man received notice and warning and chose to continue riding anyways. And this is basically the effect on the listener or the notice aspect of this. So this would not be inadmissible hearsay, but rather something that could be admitted through one of these exceptions. So here, the text message is admissible to show that the man had knowledge or notice that his brakes needed to be replaced. So let's look at issue 2. The second issue is whether the man's own question is admissible. And the question was, is it fine to keep riding this? So under Rule 801A, a statement must first be an assertion before it can even qualify as hearsay. Questions generally aren't assertions, they're requests for more information. And if something isn't an assertion, it isn't hearsay. So here the man isn't asserting anything. He's asking a question. He isn't saying the brakes are safe. He isn't saying the brakes are dangerous. He's asking for the technician's opinion. Because the question isn't an assertion, it isn't a statement under Rule 801. And if it's not a statement, the hearsay analysis ends before it even begins. And therefore, in conclusion for this item, the man's testimony about his own question is admissible because it isn't hearsay at all. Issue 3. Let's talk about the last item here. The technician's thumbs up in response to that question. So, unlike a question, a thumbs up is intended to communicate something. And it essentially can be interpreted to mean, yes, it's okay to ride. It's basically making an assertion. Now, why is the evidence being offered? It's being offered to show that the man reasonably relied on the technician's assurances rather than being offered to its truth. It's being offered to explain the man's conduct. So this is another non-hearsay purpose. So even if you treat it as hearsay, there's a strong argument for the present sense expression because the technician had just inspected the brakes moments earlier before making the gesture. Timing here matters. Therefore, the thumbs up could very likely be admissible, either because it's being offered to show the man's reasonable reliance on that statement, or because it falls within the present sense impression exception. So that's a quick walkthrough of an evidence question. I hope it was helpful.